Look, I think that the panel was called US-China Relations Navigating the Risks and Opportunities of a Changing Global Order. So in some ways, we're here to talk about the changing global order, whither the change, and what is the change going to lead to, right? And I think what you see is at a very, very broad level, because you have to look at things at the broad level, at a strategic level, and then come down to really analyze what's happening. Because a lot of the stuff that we keep on talking about is tactical reaction to the strategic stuff that is happening above ground, right? And that is, what is that? So we all agree, I guess, I hope and I wish we all agree that only constant in life is change. You know, whether it's in personal lives or political lives or, you know, the world. And we are currently going through the throes of a changing world, which will probably, obviously, creating the need for the order to change, if it hasn't already changed. And there are forces of resistance which want the order, or the basis of the order, the instruments of the order, or the instruments or the institutions of the order to remain the same, because they affect some people more nicely than others, and others who see the world to have changed and thus feel that the institutions of the world, the instruments of order must also change accordingly. But interestingly, what you see over here is in some ways, so there's, you could say that there is a fight for the retention of hegemonic power or the sole superpower status and its Western allies, and there's an emerging, group of countries, and one country in specific, which is coming in with, a different paradigm in some ways. But interestingly, what is actually unique about this moment is that those countries which have benefited the most from this order are the ones who have actually attacked it the most, as is in some ways representative from the defense strategy, or the security strategy paper which has recently been released, which is talking about Western democracies and the ills of Western democracies. Okay? And whatever has happened in the world is, let's fast forward. 1945, post-1945 order is what we are evidently living in, right? Now, if you look around the world, whether you look at the social contract between citizens and the state, whether you look at technology, whether you look at economic power, whether you look at technological power, whether you look at everything's changed. Everything's changed. And yet we want to continue to, govern the world, which is the remnant of an order which reflected the power structure of that time. So when power structures change, when economic realities change, the institutions that are required to address that must be flexible. But as I said before, what is interesting in this is that the very architects of the order have actually demonstrated its weakness the most. Because there was a time till the Far East Asian, you remember the time of the Asian tigers, democracy was working for everyone, liberal economic order was working for everyone, and then it stopped working. Now you can ask yourself the question, why did it stop working? Did democracies become too, full of its own contradictions? To me, one of the major reasons why the value or the soft power of the liberal democratic economic order stopped being there for the rest of the world was when it started using exceptions and not universally applying rules to everyone. So Israel is a friend, we will have no rules. We can go and massacre 70,000 people, children dead, put everything down, and we will not put any sanctions. But another country in Africa or somewhere in Asia will break one rule and there will be economic sanctions, and then people will be, left towards starvation. It doesn't matter because what we believe is in human rights, etc. When you stop espousing those rights, those values for everyone, then the soft power sort of decreases. And within that context, I think one more perhaps important point, other than the credibility gap that I at least try to talk about, is that the weaponization of the instruments of order. And what do I mean when I say that? Economic sanctions, human rights sanctions. When you start weaponizing what are supposed to be the instruments of order and not do it universally, it breaks the entire. And lastly, I think what is also very important is that the proponents and propagators of that order and the foundations on which it was built, it was supposed to look after the world order, or universally, of challenges which were those to humanity. So when you look at climate change and see, okay, which countries are consistent in coming up with technology which is facing the threat of climate change, which is going into the agreement, remaining in the agreement, trying to do more, and which countries are in doubt, all of that is a lot to say. Same with AI, same with pandemics. So I think I'm going to end by saying, on my first introduction, by saying that let's not kid ourselves. There's no fight for leadership of the world. There's a fight for hegemonic power, retention or taking of that, which currently the chaos that we see in the world is in any way.
Okay.